The 33-degree threshold, the melting point of conflict. There seems to exist a precise point on the scale of transformation, a critical degree, a tipping point where the essential nature of a thing changes. This feels true in the physical world, and by the immutable Hermetic law of correspondence, it feels just as true within our own consciousness. Just as water transforms from rigid, separate ice into flowing, connecting liquid at 32 degrees Fahrenheit, we can sense a threshold within every conflict, be it cellular, personal, or global, where the inflammation turns to healing and competition gives way to cooperation. This doesn't appear random. It feels like the application of a precise temperature, a change in the fundamental vibration of the situation. The ancient Hermetic principle of polarity teaches that everything is dual, everything has poles, everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. This feels like the philosophical key to understanding our own 33-degree threshold. Competition and cooperation don't seem like warring enemies. They look like the two poles of the same essential energy of interaction. One is characterized by separation, defense, and a perception of scarcity. The other is characterized by connection, synergy, and a recognition of shared flow. They exist on a single spectrum where we place our focus, our identity, and our intention seems to determine which pole we experience. To find this threshold, we might first look within. The principle of correspondence, as above so below, as within so without, provides this map. The conflicts we perceive in the world often feel like a precise reflection of the unresolved polarities within our own being. An external argument over resources can mirror an internal battle between a sense of lack and the knowing of abundance. A geopolitical standoff can reflect a personal, psychological fortress we've built. The day that we struggle against can look like a projection of a discovered part of us. Therefore, the primary battlefield feels internal. It is the landscape of our consciousness. As the Kybalion states, the all is mind, the universe is mental. To change the outer reality, we might first need to transmute the inner vibration. This feels like where we find the practical science of the 33-degree threshold. It looks like the art of conscience polarization. We aren't passive victims swinging between the poles of love and hate, peace and anger, cooperation and competition. The Hermetic adept learns to polarize their consciousness to choose deliberately which end of the spectrum to inhabit and amplify. When we feel the cold rigidity of conflict forming, the ice of blame, the frost of resentment, we have a choice. We can add more cold, more separation, and harden the position. Or we can apply the gentle, consistent heat of a higher understanding. This heat isn't the fire of anger, which only melts things destructively. It feels like the warmth of the observer's awareness. It is the compassionate question, what in me needs to be heard, to be reintegrated, that is causing me to see an enemy here? It is the willingness to look at the situation not from the perspective of the isolated, threatened cell, but from the vantage point of the whole body's intelligence. We raise the vibration of our attention from fear to curiosity, from defense to inquiry. At a certain point, a critical mass of this inner warmth is reached. The ice of a fixed position, I am right, they are wrong, begins to soften at the edges. This is our 33-degree threshold. It feels like the moment we stop trying to win the conflict and start seeking to understand the conflict. Winning looks like a competitive goal, rooted in the pole of separation. Understanding feels like a cooperative act, rooted in the pole of connection. When we cross this threshold, the entire nature of the engagement changes. Communication is no longer a volley of attacks, but a flow of information. The other person ceases to be a caricature of opposition and becomes once again a complex human being. We haven't necessarily agreed with them, but we have reconnected the circuit of shared humanity. The inflammation subsides because the immune system of our psyche is no longer attacking a mistaken enemy. It is beginning a process of integration. This principle manifests with profound elegance in the physical body. Consider neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire and reorganize itself based on experience. For decades, science believed the adult brain was fixed and unchangeable. We now know this isn't true. The brain isn't static ice, it is dynamic, living water. When we learn a new skill, recover from an injury, or consciously reframe a persistent thought pattern, we are applying a kind of mental heat. We are encouraging neurons to form new connections, to forge new pathways of understanding where old, rigid pathways of reaction once dominated. This feels like biological alchemy, the leaden, habitual mind being transmuted into the gold of flexible awareness. We are literally reprogramming the most complex organism we know by changing the input, by raising the vibration of our experiences and intentions. Similarly, the body engages in a constant silent dance at the 33-degree threshold through cellular regeneration. While the popular notion that every cell is replaced every 7 years is an oversimplification, the underlying truth feels profound. The body is in a state of continuous renewal. Skin cells shed and are replaced every few weeks. Liver cells regenerate over a few years. Even in the heart and brain, once thought to be static, there is evidence of slow, lifelong renewal and rewiring. This isn't random decay and rebuilding. It appears as a scheduled, intelligent process of letting go of the old and damage to make new for the new and healthy. The body seems to know the precise threshold where cell's purpose is served, where it must apoptose, die with grace, so that a new cell can take its place for the benefit of the whole organism. It is the ultimate act of cooperation, the individual cell's sacrifice for the life of the body. Our spiritual and psychological growth follows this same regenerative cycle. Aspects of our ego, beliefs, and emotional patterns that were once necessary for survival may have now become rigid, inflamed points of conflict. They feel like mental and emotional cells that have served their purpose, but now block the flow. The 33-degree threshold is the moment we consciously choose to let that old pattern die, to release that grudge, to soften that judgment, to thaw that frozen trauma. We allow it to be reabsorbed by the warm waters of our compassionate awareness so that new understanding can grow in its place. This is how we replace ourselves, not every 7 years, but in every moment of conscious choice. The harmony between cooperation and competition isn't found by eradicating one in favor of the other. It feels found by mastering the pendulum swing between them, as taught by the principle of rhythm. There is a time for the healthy competition of an immune cell destroying a true invader. There is a time for the deep cooperation of mitochondria sharing energy to power the cell. Wisdom lies in knowing what time it is and in having the mastery to apply the correct temperature. It is a situation, a true threat requiring a firm boundary, applying cold to stop a spread? Or is it a misunderstanding, a shadow of our own creation, requiring the melting heat of empathy? Conflict resolution, therefore, doesn't feel like a battle to be won. It feels like a temperature to be found. It is the search for the precise degree of understanding, humility, and courage that will allow the frozen, separated parts of our lives, inner and outer, to melt back into connection. We can stop trying to shatter the ice with force. Instead, we can become the consistent, gentle sun. We can warm the space between us and the other with the light of non-judgmental attention, listening until we hear the first faint drip of melting. That sound is a threshold being crossed. That is the sound of inflammation turning to healing. That is the sound of a new reality, born not from conquest, but from the courageous choice to transform competition into communion.